Well, that is actually a bit of a great segue to another topic we have here that our audience could not believe the first time around. And that is the Chinese, the Russians, the
Yep.
Iranians. When you look at those three, I think feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this. I feel like those three are the big three threats that the U.S. is probably focused on. Is that correct? China, Russia, Iran?
Yeah, and from my perspective, and again, this is just me. I'm fairly myopic. I train fighter pilots to do fighter pilot things, and we don't train to Iran.
Really? Okay. And is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
just
because
because their
what's
gear's
their Air
so
Force
old?
look like right now?
Right. It's old F-14s,
Yeah,
isn't it, from like the
yeah, they
1970s?
don't have one. That's the answer. They don't have an Air Force. So, I mean, if we were to go into Iran, and this is again just from my lane that I'm in right now, what I think I can speak somewhat educated to, we would be going over there in some kind of strike capacity, not an air capacity. We would be
Oh,
going to hit targets on the ground, most likely.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, so then we'll scratch out Iran,
yeah,
Russia, and China. Both
yep,
big militaries. Obviously, Russia's in a war in Ukraine
yeah.
currently
They're not
going
as big
on.
as you think, huh?
Yeah, apparently not as
Yeah,
advanced as they wanted the
exactly.
world to believe. What would you say the gap is between our air power and China or Russia's air power?
Um, I don't think Russia is quite there. I think China's probably closer. And I think my buddy said this when he was on the show. I think that they're not really inventing new things; they're stealing things and re-engineering them potentially. So they are lagging the fight just a little bit, but not by much. And the things that we're training to nowadays, they're fairly capable. Um, not super scary, but they're fairly capable. I think
So when
really what it would come down to, it would come down to attrition in the end.
Well, I'll get to that in 1 second. But when you
Okay.
say they're not scary but capable, can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, I would say that if you were to draw it out and say, who's the closest thing we have to a peer-to-peer enemy right now, it would probably be China. Just from an Air Force capacity. I mean, look around the world. Nobody else is really quite there. So when you look at the capabilities that we have in our Air Force, they have a lot of the same capabilities. Not exactly the same, but a lot of the same.
So perfect, I love the way this is rolling. So when you say not exactly the same, is there an example you can give of something we have that the Chinese could not at this time replicate?
I don't know that they have the depth of stealth technology that we do. And forgive me if I'm being very vague on this,
No,
because
that's fine.
I do still kind of operate in this world, so I have to be really. I told you in the pregame I was going to have to measure my words
Yeah.
carefully, and I can't let all of the cats out of the bag, if you know what I mean. I think that China probably doesn't have the depth of stealth technology that we do. That's not to say that they don't have any. That's to say that they don't probably have the depth of it that we do.
So, and then this goes back to the attrition thing, which you said, which
Mm-hmm.
whenever you go online, I love going on YouTube and watching documentaries about different scenarios that might unfold. It's probably drives my girlfriend crazy, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to stop doing it. They always talk about how the great advantage that China has is if they want to fight over Taiwan or something, all their stuff is there. It's right off their coast. It's their home field. We can only fight with what we can bring to the region from the
Yeah.
United
Yeah.
States.
That's an advantage.
So, but that's what I want to know. How big of an advantage is that to China? Is that something we can overcome, or is that something that essentially you're really rolling the dice with the
Well,
numbers?
you get into so many different layers here. So, I mean, just right off the top of my head, if I were to kind of war game this out a little bit, let's say that we're thinking about most likely course of action, most dangerous course of action. Most dangerous course of action we say is they're going to send the hordes. They're going to send every plane that they have across the Taiwan Straits, and they're going to try to take us out that way. Um, I don't know that we could get enough missiles airborne. Just with the assets that we can forward deploy, with the assets that we can get there in time, with the assets that we can have on station at the time, with the loadouts that we have, missile count is going to be a thing. It's going to have to factor into that equation a little bit. On the other hand, what if they decided to slow roll out their threats and just send a few at a time? Well, we can shoot all those guys down, but at what cost? Can we put enough fuel out there in the forward battle space? Here, I'm flying an F-15 or an F-35. I can't land on an aircraft carrier and get gas. I have to go somewhere else and get gas. That takes a lot of time that I'm not in the battle space. So you see, there's so many layers to this onion that it's not just a, you know, could we beat them? Could we forward deploy enough assets? Yeah, man, you could park enough things on concrete out there, but could you fly them? I don't know. If you could fly them, could you have enough weapons on them to shoot down the other guys? I don't know. it's it's good. It makes for fun wargaming for sure.
Do you think that Russia getting bogged down 2+ years in Ukraine has given the Chinese maybe some second thought about if they thought invading Taiwan was going to be easy? Because I think Russia thought invading Ukraine was going to be easy and this be over in a week. And now we're more than 2 years later and it's still going on.
Oh yeah, I don't know, man. That's a good question, and I think you could look at it from a couple different angles. One, maybe they're looking at Russia, going, "Okay, let's learn some lessons from this and how to not fight a war." On the other hand, you look at it, if you looked at it from a geopolitical standpoint, and you go, and if I'm in China right now and I'm looking at geopolitics, and I go, "Wait a minute, the U.S. is they're encumbered in so many areas right now. What if we went now?" While their forces are kind of divided. You know what I mean? So it brings up a very interesting discussion from the Chinese perspective. And I don't know what the answer would be. I mean, obviously they haven't done anything yet, so that's a good thing. But they could be looking at this on one hand and go, man, if we were to utilize this as kind of a divide and conquer tactic, now might be our chance.
And that's a very good point that you hear people make as well.
Yeah.
And it is, it's, you're kind of weighing the scales. Well,
Yeah.
let's hope that we don't find ourselves in a World War III, a shooting war in the South China Sea, and God knows what could happen from there.
No, I hope not, man. And from China's perspective, we talked a lot about their hardware capabilities, but we didn't talk at all about their cyberware, their software capabilities. Um, and I'll give you this example, and I'll kind of let the listeners and the viewers kind of think about this and chew on this and form their own opinions. I was in an exercise one time, and we have squadrons in the Air Force called the aggressor squadrons. Are you familiar with these?
Nope.
Okay, they're a squadron that flies usually F-16s, maybe have some F-15s mixed in there. They're painted like bad guy jets. They they fly bad guy tactics. The entire squadron is dedicated to being the enemy of the good guy squadrons. And they have cyber people in there, they have administrative people in there, they have intelligence people in there, just like any other squadron, but they're devoted to taking out the good guys. All right. So we're in this exercise, and the cyber dudes in the aggressor squadron took down our unclassified computer network for our squadron that day. They just basically unplugged it. I don't know how they did it, but we couldn't log in to our unclassified network that day. We did not fly. Because they took down our unclassified network, we didn't have the capability to go to a sticky note and put it on the board and say, you're flying that jet. For some reason, we could not get over that hurdle. Now, this was 15 years ago. So would that happen today? I can't tell you that, yes or no. So I'll let your listeners think about that for a second. What if China's biggest threat is not a hardware threat? What if it's a software threat?
I mean, that's a great point. Do we have the ability to do the same thing to them?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Okay.
100%. Sure. So, I mean, I think it's naive to think that we have all this awesome capabilities and all these awesome tactics that nobody knows about, and we're keeping everything close hold in like Area 51 hangars and shit, and they don't have the same things. All right. I think that's a super naive thought for us. I think you have to look at it as whatever we have, they have. What we know, they know. It's called peer to peer for a reason, right? And while they may not be exactly there, they're pretty damn close. All right. Close enough to make me worried that I would assume going into a fight that they know within reason what I'm probably going to do. what our capabilities are. They train to this. They know this. They've been briefed on it, just like we've been briefed on their tactics and their capabilities. We have to assume that they've been briefed on our tactics and capabilities.
No, it's a very, very, very fair point. And I think, like you said, let the audience, that cyber thing is absolutely nuts. I've never
That
heard
one
anyone,
scares the hell out of me.
I mean, that it scares the hell out of me. And I'm just only
Yeah.
now hearing about it. I mean, there's really no other way to say it than
Yeah.
that's terrifying. I do want to talk a little bit here about the F-35
Okay.
because I know that you work with it now and
Yep.
it's an incredible piece of technology. But before we get into kind of, well, we'll fuse them together. Do you remember when that F-35, what was that, like 2 years ago, went off the aircraft carrier deck into the South China Sea?
Oh, no, I don't remember that one.
So it was, I mean, the news was talking about it not nearly as much as the thing went to land, something went wrong, the pilot ejected, and the plane went into the South China
Oh,
Sea. And China sent these salvage ships to go find it. We sent our own, crews to go get it, and we got it back first, which is obviously great. In the event that F-35, this highly advanced stealth fighter, had been pulled up by a Chinese salvage ship, what do you think would have happened?
well, they would have probably tried their best to reverse engineer it and find out find out what made the F-35 special. That I
So,
mean, that's what they do. That's what they're notorious for. So
but you don't think we would have done anything to stop that ship from making it back to China?
I think we probably would have. Yeah, there would have probably been some kind of interdiction to make sure that that didn't happen. I mean,
I,
those kinds of operations go they go way back. You know, the everybody from the DoD to the CIA would have been involved in that.
well, and here's the reason I asked that question. Do you remember when we bombed the Chinese embassy in Serbia?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's never been confirmed. There's been a lot of reports that they had the wreckage of, what was it, an F-117 that had been shot down in that NATO
yeah.
campaign, and the Chinese allegedly, according to reports, had part of that wreckage in their embassy, and then a B-2 flew over and thought they were bombing
Oh,
the factory down the street.
oh, oops, that went away. Yeah,
Yeah, oops. That's why I asked about the missing F-35 because
yeah,
it's a eerily similar situation. But on the F-35, without getting into anything you can't get into, I'm not an
yeah,
expert on the F-35. I don't know anything about it other than it's a fifth gen stealth fighter. It's an
yeah.
incredible piece of technology. What makes the F-35 unique compared to the F-15 or the F-16 or maybe in the F-22? Are there differences between? I mean, I know there's differences, but can you explain what puts the F-35 in the world it's in?
Yeah, well, to just draw a line of demarcation here, F-15s, F-16s, um, A-10s, you know, all those are all fourth gen fighters. And while they're very capable, when you move into fifth gen fighters, you're in a whole nother world. You're in advanced avionics, advanced radar stuff. Um, Obviously, there's the stealth component. There's so much difference between those two that it's not even a fair discussion. Um, while those fourth gen fighters are still very capable and they still bring a lot to the battlefield, they are not fifth gen fighters. They can't they just can't do the same thing. I mean, think about this, man. The F-15C models. The F-15, the F-15 flew its first sortie in 74. Or I mean, yeah, it's been that long. That's 50 years ago, bro. So now we're talking about airplanes who are flying their first sorties 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you know, whatever it was. There is a vast difference in it. The way that the aircraft is built, the way that the aircraft operates, it's just completely different. When you add the avionics suite, that's an upgrade in and of itself. And the Strike Eagle is very robust. The F-15E is very robust when it comes to avionics. But when you go into the fifth gen world, take that and multiply it by a factor, and then you add stealth technology on top of that, it's formidable.
What are some mission sets that the F-35 is kind of its bread and butter?
I think it was probably now I don't know this for sure. I have some theories and I tell some jokes around it when I'm giving lectures and stuff. But I think that the F-35's I think its biggest strength is getting in close into the middle of a battle space and sharing that information with other people. That's really what I think it's going to be best at if it comes down to it.
And that's kind of similar to the new B-21
Yeah.
Raider, because I know that when Boeing, Jason and I talked about this too, when Boeing brought that plane out for the first time, one of the things that was very hyped about it was that it can fly over a battle space. It sucks up all this information,
Mm-hmm.
and then it shoots that information out to
Yeah.
whoever needs it. The B-21, according to, I mean, the people who designed it, can detect submarines at levels that a plane of that magnitude you wouldn't think
Oh wow.
would be able to. That's the kind of technology. I'm just some random dude. Like, my brain literally
Yeah.
explodes at the idea. What would be something the F-35 would not be good at? You would not want to put an F-35 for this type of mission.
The Taiwan Straits scenario would probably not be its. He would not be my go-to platform for that scenario.
And why is
Um,
that?
well, and I use that. I can't really get too deep into it. I just say this, and Jason hit on this. You know, in order to preserve the stealth technology of these aircraft, they have to carry their weapons inside, which means that they're limited, right? So the F-35 only has 4 weapon stations internally. That's not a lot of firepower. You know, when I can take a Strike Eagle out and I've got 8 per jet. You know, I'm doubling the amount. Um, you know, when you go pound for pound in gas, I'm doubling the amount of firepower that I can bring to the fight in a fighter that's really designed to be out before their threats are even a threat, really, before their capabilities are even a threat to me, is the design. If we get into a close in turning fight, I already told you the Strike Eagle is not great at that. And spoiler alert, the F-35 is really not either. So the standoff capabilities of the two airplanes, I would rather take a Strike Eagle to that fight because I can take more firepower.
So does the same logic apply then to the F-22, that the F-22 wouldn't be really great in the Taiwanese Straits as well?
F-22 has a lot different capabilities. F-22 was built as an air-to-air fighter, and
Gotcha.
so it has a lot more internal weapons carry capability. It is also mechanized for that fight, so that's a different discussion.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll
Yeah,
see that. Learn something
yeah,
new every day.
yeah.
Learn some.
That's a total different discussion, and we train to a lot of tactics that amplify the strengths and the weaknesses of all of these aircraft put together. So it's
Got it.
not just like we're not just going to send 2 Strike Eagles down the lane to defend against the Chinese hordes that are coming across the line, right? There's going to be a robust force package that's put together, and everybody has different capabilities, and everybody's sharing information, and it's going to be a very difficult fight for them to win.
When you take a look in the future, like you're talking about how the first F-15 flew more than 50 or right around 50 years ago. When you take a look 10, 15, 20 years in the future, what do you think air combat and air platforms is going to look like? Is there a
Oh,
possibility we get something where we have full-blown fighter jets, but they're operated like a drone, but they're fighter
yeah.
jets capable weapons?
Are you familiar with Annie Jacobson?
Annie Jacobs, the
Yeah,
author? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Read some of her books, and then you could probably answer your own question. Um, the I love the movie Stealth. I get this question all the time, and it's an old movie. It's got Jessica Biel in a tight flight suit. It's pretty cool. But basically, they've got AI fighters with a pilot in one aircraft, and then he has 3 or 4 AI bots fighters that he's controlling, and that he's going out to fight with his little wingman, his digital wingman, if you will. I don't think that's too far off the horizon, probably. Um, I think with the advances that we're making in technology, that's going to be a capability coming up. I'd say probably within a decade or so, maybe. Um, the next step would be fully autonomous fighter platforms that are out there, which is a unique that presents some unique challenges when you start talking about rules of engagement and decision making, and do you have a man in the loop always? There's a lot of, I think, aside from the technology, there's a lot of issues with that just from a ideological standpoint that we're going to have to break through.
Can you, sorry, I'm confused
Yeah.
by what you're saying. When you say a fully autonomous, what do you mean? A pilot who's just on his own making his
No,
own.
no, an airplane that does everything itself.
So there is no
There's
pilot in it.
That's right. Yeah. So somebody in a mission planning cell puts some stuff on a little geek stick and sticks it in the airplane, and that airplane takes off and goes and does a mission. I don't think we're very far away from that.
But like you said, there could be, ethical, or what if the code goes wrong and the plane just
Yeah.
opens up? I mean, that
Yeah.
that could
Well,
open a whole.
they did a test out at I think it was out at Edwards not too long ago where they had an AI. It was an AI F-16, I believe, fighting a manned F-16, and he won 10 out of 10 fights.
That's
The
crazy.
AI, yeah, but well, I mean, think about it, man. Obviously, airplanes are limited by how much G they can pull, right? Structurally, they're limited by how much G they can pull, or you'll literally rip the wings off of them. I've seen airplanes with bent frames from pulling too many G's. But there's also the pilot. The warm goo in the middle at 98.6 degrees is a limiting factor in some of this stuff. You read all the time about jets that plant themselves into the ground because the pilot G locked. He lost consciousness because all the blood rushed out of his brain. He was pulling too many G's. It happens all the time, right? Well, if you don't have a pilot in the cockpit, now you're not limited to that. Now you can build a platform that can pull more G or outperform what would normally be a restriction just by having a dude in the jet. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, what's to say that we couldn't build a 10G fighter or a 12G fighter? And when you bring a 12G fighter to the merge against an 8G fighter, he's going to win every time. Add stealth technology to that to where the dude can't even see him before he's rolled in on his six and guns him down. It's no contest, man. So the cool thing, and the reason that I brought up Annie Jacobson is there was a point to that, right? And I encourage your listeners to go, if you can't stand reading her books that get down into the weeds of this stuff, go watch YouTube videos. Go listen to her talk about DARPA. Go listen to her talk about Area 51. Go listen to her talk about some of these programs that she's uncovered through the Freedom of Information Act. And the reason I bring that up is she's talking about things that were happening in the 60s that nobody had any idea was going on until just a few years ago. So what's going on right now that we won't know about for 50 years? Think about it in those terms. And then suddenly you have a different perspective when you start thinking about these things.
Well, and that is a great segue to a